persuaded to say and open. So I was in great fear that we would not actually have a talk. Looks all right, just about. Right, a couple of housekeeping kind of points before we start. I can't remember, but maybe I didn't mention kind of wanting a sort of total ban on iPhones in the lecture and the sections. In respect of that, I will tell you that I came to an arrangement with all of your significant others, whomever they may be, and they have agreed not to email you at all between 12 o'clock and 1:30, and then between 1:30 and 2:55. So you will not be dumped. You will not get any exciting messages for the next. You can focus entirely on yourself as a professional, creative, and intellectual person, and that will give you that. You are intellectuals, whether you like it or not. You're dealing with complexity, you are thinking, you are intellectuals. I don't care whether you don't want to be tough. Life's too, life's hard. You're an intellectual, you're a graduate, period. One till you fail. Second point, PowerPoints and slides. I use a lot of PowerPoints slides in this talk. I almost kind of compose the talk like that. And this is much more than I would normally do for a sort of theoretical talk. But I do it in order that people can download the lectures afterwards, can get the quotations, and especially those of you who are struggling both to understand me, which is hard enough, and deal with a second language at the same time. The idea was to have it, as much of the text as possible that you could access afterwards, so that you could sit and more or less listen to me. You don't need to try to write down the quotations. You know they're going to be there. You can, as it were, think what I am saying. So normally, not as much of these talks will be visible, but it's my attempt to see if you can get round some of these problems. And that's how I've started to do these. I'll get your feedback and whether you think there are in fact too many slides and they're too complicated, feedback through your section leaders. Third point, we're going to start a second assignment in the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to try to show you something of what this assignment is in this talk. What the assignment, very roughly, will be that you will use the readings and lectures from week 1 to begin to construct what we might call your own future manifesto of designing. That is to say, in the wealth of reading that you've got, are there not a whole series of positive and negative propositions from which you can construct a kind of rough beginnings of your sort of working ethical, manifesto, either by things that you agree with, yes, that, or things that you absolutely do not agree with. No, I do not want that. I want to work against that. So there is two things. Now I'm going to explore the assignment that I gave as a sort of as I have written it with the section that I'm talking to, because Ainsley's away. And then I'll probably rewrite the assignment tomorrow and send it out. The teaching assistants have all seen this assignment and they made lots of interesting comments. So you'll get the final assignment probably Friday or the weekend. But I wanted you to start thinking during this talk, and I will try to link up this assignment, because this really is your chance to kind of read these, to read what we are reading, not just sort of academically over there, but in relationship to you, how you can interpret it for your own future practices. Okay, the lecture today is, we can give it in its title, which is Rethinking Technology, and the subtitle, which is really at the bottom here. The lecture is a continuation of Sven's, and specifically we're trying to think, as I put it here, think technology beyond technology. You'll see why, you'll see the whole proposition of this as we come out. But we're thinking not just in relation to what it is and what has been partly, but essentially in relationship to the future. The text I've mostly used, you'll find, is Douglas Rushkoff's little book, Program or Be Programmed. Not because it's the most brilliant text I gave you, but it's one of the simplest, it's one of the easiest to access. It's not the most sophisticated, but it gives us a kind of starting point. He has enough useful points to begin a discussion, and kind of that will do. And him you will see supported by Jaron Lahanier quite a bit. And there's a sort of tacit debate here between optimism and pessimism, with me coming down slightly more on the pessimistic side, as I have to. But nonetheless, trying to sort of, almost if you like, see the shards of optimism within pessimism on that. But the first necessity we'll see is to rethink what on earth this term technology means, because it is perhaps the most evident term we have today, and the one we actually least understand. It's as bad as design in that respect. We think we know what design is, but the term is actually meaningless. I'm going to try to show you that technology is almost as much a meaningless term, and we have to think it. Now, we have to think technology so that we can create what I'm calling here a free relationship to it. Now, a free relation to technology means being neither determined by it, nor giving ourselves over to it, Kurzweil, Kelly and people, nor seeing it as a magic potion, Google rifting in different ways, Google for, you know, the more wealth than anybody has ever accumulated. Nor, this is my temptation, simply rejecting it or treating it only as a disaster. To stand away from technology is not to have a free relationship to it. Me not having an iPhone is not having a free relationship to the iPhone. It's allowing the iPhone in a way to intimidate me. So, none of these relations are what I would call a free relation. What is a free relation? Much harder to define. It's always so much easier to define things negatively than it is affirmatively. But I would say three aspects, and I don't like my own language here, it should be improved. One is that we have to accept technology as ours. We, I'm talking collectively, the culture, to internalize technology, to accept the folding of technology and subjectivity, things and persons, that we are bound in some ways. Secondly, to become capable of utilizing it for human ends and not merely as means, to twist what people like Demben have called the apparatus of technology away from instrumentality and desubjectivity, technology as an instrument of human and not merely technological possibility. Third, most abstract of all, to constitute technology no longer as a purity, no longer as this entity which is pure, floats up here, no longer as an inversion of making and poiesis. Poiesis just means really poetic making. What we do, design is poiesis. But to think it poetically in the full sense. And this lovely sentence from Agamben, again, in his little early book on aesthetics, where he talks about poetic making as that which opens to man his authentic temporal dimension, the space of our belonging to the world within which we can take the original measure or the gauging of how we exist in the world, how we dwell, he uses Heidegger's term, but how we exist in the world, and find again our present truth within the unstoppable flow of linear time. A fantastic, beautifully, incredibly complicated sentence you could only tell for a PhD, but lovely that you get, you intuit what his meaning here. He's trying to get us to think about this space of making, which he calls poetic making, so it has this element of gauging in it, to think it out, to actually, because this is the space in which we find ourselves. So, it gives making a considerable weight there. Now, this brings us to the key proposition of the talk, which is I'm hinting, is that in order to have a free relationship to technology, we'll have to abandon the category to technology. And the reason for this, as I'll show you, is that this concept is too bound up with 19th century technology. It doesn't stretch to accommodate what's happening. And as a result, the term badly distorts understanding of what is emerging. So that's the major reason. Jean Lanier, the problem is not technology, but the way we think about it. Right on, absolutely. Now, I will say that we can't think technology today, can't think it's satisfactory through our existing idea of technology. We can't think it because technology in practice is going beyond the limits of the concept technology. Here is James Hunt, and a quote I will take up again at the end of the talk. The designed artificial world that envelops us is coming alive with communicative possibilities. We're drifting into a new alignment in both mind and body with technology that is far more immersive and encompassing and confounding. In other words, we're sliding to a point where we just can't pull technology in ourselves. They're locked in, and we have to think that. We have to have a concept of technology that can take them. So this means we need a different framework as to what technology is and could be. And this is really what this course is designed to offer you. We also need a new framework because, as Douglas Rushkoff reminds us, technology today is life-changing. We're in a different situation than we were even 30 or 40 years ago. We're not just building cars or TV sets. Devices that if we later decide we don't like, we can choose not to use. We're tinkering with the genome, building intelligent machines, and designing nanotechnologies that will continue where we left off. So the stakes are much higher. And the involvement with us is much greater. So these are technologies that will directly determine not just how, but even who we are, and this is essential. And it's the digital technologies and technologies who will be shaping the world. And now there's kind of no ethical escape. Lanier, in a small article that was done from an interview with him, said we can't continue with a situation where computer technicians say, oh, the computer did it, not me. It's not me, it's the computer. We can't have that. It's no longer, we cannot allow that kind of autonomy. We have to take responsibility for the technology. And in this process, what has happened here? We have to remember how technologies work on us. The mechanisms by which technologies influence you is different from that in other spheres of life. Technologies don't use persuasion. If you translate that, it actually says underneath it, don't use persuasion to engage you in effect. We tinker with your philosophy by direct manipulation of your cognitive experience, not indirectly for argument. So Lanier's point, and it's a very good one, is that technology slips into us under consciousness. Think about Adorno's argument, and that's a short piece on technology. It affects us without us often being able to think it out. That's the problem. Lanier. We make up extensions to your being, so like remote eyes and ears and expanded memory. These become the structures by which you connect to the world and other people. These structures in turn change how you conceive of yourself and the world. And they don't ask you about it. They give it to you. It slips below mind. That's the point. That's Lanier's point. They do so acting below thought. And they work through forms that lock us into modes of experience that may be deeply unsatisfying or dangerous. And there is a seemingly endemic tendency towards reductionism. Two examples here. On Hawkins, how a form locks us into experience. He gives it's a small example, but a beautifully telling one. He talks about the music software, MIDI, that was conceived by a keyboard player, and from, he says, a keyboard player's point of view. So it conceived of music in terms of keyboard events like key up and key down. This meant it could not describe the curvy transient expression of a singer or saxophonist, that should be. It could only describe the tile mosaic of the keyboard, not the watercolor world of the violin. It's a beautiful, beautiful example there. How a form restricts the amount of experience that you can play with. That which should enable a range of experience finishes up actually curtailing it. We all have that experience. Using files and folders on Windows is often incredibly frustrating. You can think, everybody can think of examples once it's pointed out. But this question then, the question of the lock-in, is really a question of form. It's really a design question, not a technology question. And reductionism has got an equally pertinent set of observations. Gadget argues that certain specific popular internet designs of the moment tend to pull us into life patterns that gradually degrade the ways in which each of us exists as an individual. These designs are more unfortunate designs, a beautiful term. Really, that term should be brought out. Unfortunate designs. There's a lot of. They are more orientated to treating people as relays in a global brain. De-emphasizing personhood and the intrinsic value of individuals leads to all sorts of maladies. This comes from the introduction to his first book. So these are important. Now these shifts I mentioned above are of course already occurring. I mentioned in the lecture in week 1 about the gradual internalization of technology from 1800 to 2000, basically from the factory to the home, into consciousness, into the body. The digitalization is of course an intensification of this process. Without losing its real materiality, and you must keep this in mind, the world also becomes increasingly software mediated. Lanier again. Sectors like manufacturing, energy, healthcare and transportation aren't yet particularly automated or net-centric. But eventually, most will probably become software mediated. That seems an important term to me now. Software could be the final industrial revolution. It might subsume all the revolutions to come. And we've already seen this in a way, in how the artificialist world came to be. The artificial before the impact of the digital, let's say roughly pre-1970. The three realms are, of course, related. They feed into each other. We would have all sorts of feedback loops between these realms, but by no means fully integrated. It's why, in a way, we still saw technical systems as over there, language as over there, nature, even when changed by man, over there. In the last 40 or 50 years, this has changed considerably. The digital has become the integrative force between the three realms. So it knits them together in ever closer relationships. Now, we're already aware that the digital is shaping our world. Rushkoff. We're living through a real shift, one that's crashed our economy twice, changed the way we educate and entertain ourselves, altered the very fabric of human relationships. So no small revolutions. This is a shift that engenders real possibilities for consciousness. Just as words gave people the ability to pass on knowledge for what we now call civilization, a networked activity could soon offer access to shared thinking, an extension of consciousness still inconceivable to most of us. It needs formulating, it needs thinking. What on earth does networked activity and shared thinking mean? But you can guess what he's trying to express here, the sense of being on the edge of something in terms of an alteration in human consciousness. And not only for consciousness, also for the economy and by extension for politics and society as a whole. So, and he says, applying this to the economy could conceivably mean that our existing patterns of supply and demand and command and control give way to an entirely more engaged, connected and collaborative mode or modes of participation. Could, not shall, could. So in other words, are we on the the edge of a social, economic and intellectual transformation? And if so, how? In what direction or directions? Now you can read the optimistic scenarios of these possibilities in the readings that I've given you. Michel Serres, talking about really human possibilities. Clay Shirky's text that I've scarcely referred to here, but on creativity, the possibilities of creativity and social generosity. Rifkin you saw last week. He would be a superb second-hand car salesman. Schmidt and Coy with their plan for world domination. Kevin Kelly on what technology wants to be. Kurzweil and the creation of an artificial mind. So a range of optimism to give you that, despite my own misgivings. But we need to ask more about the transformative nature of digital technologies.